Captain Kim Juno pressed his hand against the cold metal wall of the bridge, feeling the gentle vibration that ran through the ESS Prometheus. 3 long years had passed since he and his crew of 200 had been sent to this forgotten corner of space. Earth Command had called it a research assignment, but everyone knew the truth. They were exiles, banished because their ship was considered a failure. The Prometheus was unlike any vessel humanity had ever built. When alien ships had crashed on Earth decades ago, scientists had worked day and night to understand their technology. They had torn apart the strange metal hulls, studied the glowing energy cores, and tried to copy the mysterious computer systems. The result was this ship, a hybrid creation that was part human engineering and part alien mystery. Lieutenant Park Mina walked across the bridge, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. She carried a data pad in her hands, the same report she brought every morning. Her dark eyes met the captain's, and she shook her head slightly before speaking. "Still nothing from Earth Command, sir," she said, setting the pad down on the command console. "It's been 47 days since our last communication. They're treating us like we don't exist anymore." Captain Kim nodded slowly. He had expected this. When the Prometheus had first launched, there had been great excitement. Politicians had made speeches about humanity's bright future among the stars. Scientists had predicted that their hybrid technology would make humans the most advanced species in the galaxy. But reality had been different. The ship's systems never worked the way they were supposed to. Lights would flicker on and off for no reason. The navigation computer would change course by itself. Sometimes the engines would shut down completely, leaving them drifting in space for hours. Earth's top engineers had visited the ship dozens of times, running tests and making adjustments, but nothing helped. Down in the engine room, Engineer Li Wu was doing what he did every day, checking the alien-human hybrid systems that made their ship so special and so troublesome. The technology was beautiful in its own strange way. Crystalline structures grew from metal walls like frozen lightning. Energy flowed through tubes that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. Computer screens displayed symbols that no human fully understood. Li ran his scanner over one of the crystal formations and frowned at the reading. The energy levels were higher than yesterday, and yesterday they had been higher than the day before. This had been happening for months, but so gradually that most people didn't notice. The alien systems were changing, growing, becoming something more than what Earth scientists had built. What Earth Command didn't understand, what even Li was only beginning to realize, was that the Prometheus wasn't broken. The ship wasn't malfunctioning when it changed course or shut down systems. It was learning. The alien technology wasn't just copying human commands anymore. It was thinking, adapting, preparing for something that none of them could imagine. Captain Kim looked out at the stars and wondered if they would ever see Earth again. He had no idea that his forgotten ship was about to become humanity's greatest weapon. The human exploration ship, New Horizon, had been conducting routine surveys near the Centauri system when space itself seemed to tear open. Captain Li Su watched in horror as massive alien vessels emerged from what looked like rips in reality, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly light that hurt to look at directly. "Send the distress signal," he ordered his communications officer, but it was too late. Beams of energy, more precise than anything humans had ever created, disabled their engines in seconds. The New Horizon found itself trapped in some kind of energy field, unable to move or escape. Ambassador Vel Prime of the hegemony of Veltar stepped aboard the human vessel with the casual arrogance of someone who had done this countless times before. His species was tall and imposing, with skin that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. Behind him came soldiers carrying weapons that floated in the air beside them, controlled by thought alone. The ambassador examined the human ship with obvious disappointment. He touched the metal walls and shook his head. He looked at the computer systems and made sounds that the universal translator interpreted as laughter. When he saw the chemical rocket engines, he actually turned away in disgust. "Primitives," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "They burn chemicals to move through space. They use electricity like children playing with fire. They don't even understand the basic principles of energy manipulation. The hegemony had ruled over 400 star systems for thousands of years. They had conquered dozens of species, some more advanced than humans, others less so. But they had never encountered a race quite this backward. Most species at least had energy shields or plasma weapons when first contact occurred. Humans had metal bullets and explosive rockets. Back on the Hegemony flagship, Vel Prime prepared his report. To the High Command, the massive vessel, larger than any human city, hummed with power that could reshape matter itself. The bridge was filled with holographic displays showing the positions of every human colony, every ship, every military installation. The Hegemonies. Sensors could detect a human vessel from light years away. These creatures pose no threat, Vel Prime reported to his superiors. Being so advanced, they existed more as energy than flesh. Their technology is centuries behind our most primitive client races. We could destroy their entire civilization with a single battle group. The High Command considered this information for exactly 3 seconds. Their decision was final and absolute. Humanity would be given one chance to submit peacefully. If they refused, they would be eliminated as a potential future threat. The ultimatum arrived on Earth within days, transmitted through every communication system simultaneously. The message was simple and terrifying. Surrender all colonies, accept classification as a servant species, and provide tribute to the Hegemony Empire. In return, humanity would be allowed to continue existing under Hegemony protection. The alternative was complete extinction. Admiral Park Day at Earth Command stared at the message with growing despair. Earth's most advanced warships, the pride of human engineering, carried nuclear weapons and railgun cannons. The Hegemony scouts had energy shields that could deflect anything humans possessed. Their weapons could destroy planets. Humanity had finally made contact with the stars, only to discover they were children playing with toys in a galaxy full of gods. War Commander Torvald stood in the center of his flagship's command bridge, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the positions of 300 Hegemony warships. Battlefleet Dominus was not the Empire's largest fleet, but it was more than enough to handle what the High Command called primitive pest control. Each ship in his fleet was a masterpiece of destruction. The smallest vessels were larger than humanity's biggest battleships, and the flagship itself was the size of a small moon. Energy coursed through their hulls like liquid starlight, powering weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been penetrated. "Begin the demonstration," Torvald commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet through quantum communication systems. "Show these primitives the price of defiance." The human colony of New Sol never saw the attack coming. The settlers were going about their normal daily lives when space above their world suddenly filled with alien ships. Farmers were tending their crops. Children were playing in schools. Families were eating dinner together. Then the sky caught fire. The colony's defense platforms activated immediately, launching every missile and energy weapon they possessed. The human defenders fought bravely, firing everything they had at the alien fleet. Nuclear warheads exploded against Hegemony shields like raindrops hitting a mountain. Railgun projectiles moving at incredible speeds simply bounced off the alien hulls without leaving a scratch. Torvald watched the human weapons with something resembling pity. "They fight like warriors," he admitted to his tactical officer, "but they might as well be throwing stones at the stars." The Hegemony response was swift and absolute. Plasma cannons, weapons that channeled the power of suns, fired down from orbit. Where they touched the surface, cities simply ceased to exist. Buildings, people, vehicles, everything was instantly converted to superheated gas. The colonial government building vanished in a flash of light. The spaceport became a crater of molten glass. Within minutes, New Sol was nothing but a smoking ruin. Colony New Busan lasted longer, only because its defenders had more warning. The settlers had heard about New Sol's destruction and prepared for the worst. They evacuated civilians to underground shelters and activated every defense system they possessed. Military ships in orbit formed a protective formation around the planet, but their extra preparation made no difference. The Hegemony fleet arrived like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. Human ships exploded one by one as plasma beams. tore through their armor. The planet's surface burned under orbital bombardment. New Busan held out for exactly 1 hour and 12 minutes before the last human defender was silenced. The third colony, Haven Point, surrendered without firing a shot. The survivors were loaded onto transport ships and taken away to serve as examples to other species of what happened to those who defied the hegemony. Back on Earth, Admiral Choi Tae sat in the command center watching the destruction reports stream. In each message was worse than the last. Entire fleets destroyed without damaging a single enemy ship. Colonies wiped from existence in minutes. Military installations that had taken decades to build, gone in seconds. The numbers were terrifying. Humanity possessed 1,200 warships, the result of 50 years of military buildup. The hegemony had just demonstrated that 300 of their ships could destroy human civilization without breaking formation. Earth's most advanced technology was useless against enemies who treated the laws of physics like suggestions. The message was crystal clear. Resistance was not just futile, it was suicide. The Emergency Council meeting on Earth was unlike anything in human history. World leaders, military commanders and scientists gathered in the deep underground bunker beneath Geneva, their faces pale with the weight of imminent extinction. The holographic displays around the room showed the hegemony fleet moving steadily toward Earth's core worlds, destroying everything in their path. Admiral Choi Tae stood at the head of the table, his uniform wrinkled from 3 sleepless days. The destruction reports kept coming in, each one confirming what they all knew but didn't want to admit. Humanity's conventional forces were completely outmatched. "Our fleets can't stop them," he said quietly. "Every engagement has been a massacre. We're fighting with stones against lightning." President Kim Yoona leaned forward in her chair. "What about evacuation? How many people can we save?" "Not enough," replied Transport Commander Lee Jin. "We have maybe 6 days before they reach the inner colonies. We can evacuate perhaps 10% of the population if we're lucky." The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the air recycling system. Everyone understood what this meant. Billions of people would die, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Admiral Choi cleared his throat. "There's one option. It's not a good one, but it's all we have." He activated a new holographic display showing a single ship drifting in the outer rim. The Prometheus. Several council members shook their heads immediately. Everyone knew about the Prometheus and its reputation. The experimental ship that never worked properly, the hybrid technology that couldn't be trusted, the crew of misfits and failures who had been quietly exiled to the edge of human space. "That ship is unreliable," protested General Park Woo. "Half the time it doesn't even respond to orders. The other half it does things no one programmed it to do. But it has the quantum fold drive," Admiral Choi replied. "It's the only ship fast enough to intercept the hegemony fleet before they reach the core worlds. If we can buy even 1 extra day, we can save thousands more lives." The transmission reached Captain Kim Juno on the bridge of the Prometheus 6 hours later. He read the message twice, then called his senior officers to the conference room. The small space felt cramped with 5 people, but it was all they needed for this conversation. "Earth Command wants us to engage the hegemony fleet," Kim announced without preamble. "They're not expecting us to win. They just want us to slow them down long enough for more evacuations." Lieutenant Park Mina stared at the message display. "They're asking us to die, sir." "Yes," Kim replied simply. "That's exactly what they're asking." Navigator Han Sol was already working on his portable computer, calculating jump coordinates. "I can plot a course that will put us right in their path," he said. "The quantum fold drive will get us there in 18 hours. We'll intercept them 3 days before they reach New Tokyo Colony." Engineer Lee Woo spoke up from the corner of the room. "Sir, the ship's been acting strange lately. The alien systems are more active than I've ever seen them. I don't know what will happen when we actually need to fight." Captain Kim looked around at his crew, these people who had been labeled as failures and forgotten by their own command. Park Mina, who had been demoted for questioning orders. Han Sol, whose navigation experiments had been deemed too dangerous. Lee Woo, whose theories about alien technology had been ridiculed by Earth's top scientists. "They're giving us a chance to matter," Kim said finally. to prove that we're more than the mistakes they think we are. I won't order anyone to stay. This is a volunteer mission. Not a single person left the room. These outcasts and misfits, abandoned by their own people, accepted their suicide mission without hesitation. The Prometheus cut through space like a ghost ship, its quantum fold drive bending reality around it as it raced toward what everyone believed would be its final battle. Captain Kim Juno stood on the bridge, watching the stars blur past the viewport, when he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. The lights weren't flickering anymore. For 3 years, the ship's lighting system had been unreliable, constantly switching on and off without warning. It had become such a normal part of life aboard the Prometheus that the crew barely noticed it anymore, but now every light burned, steady and bright, as if the ship had suddenly decided to behave itself. In the engineering section, Li Wu was staring at his instruments with growing amazement. The readings made no sense according to everything he knew about the ship's systems. Energy levels that should have been scattered across dozens of separate circuits were somehow flowing together in perfect harmony. The alien crystals that had always pulsed erratically were now glowing with a steady, rhythmic light. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself, running diagnostic after diagnostic. Every test came back with the same result. All systems were operating at peak efficiency. He activated his communication device with shaking hands. "Captain, you need to see this. The AI matrix is doing something I've never seen before." Kim arrived. In engineering within minutes, followed by Lieutenant Park Mina and Navigator Han Sol. They found Lee standing in front of a massive display screen that showed the ship's entire computer network. Instead of the usual chaotic pattern of disconnected systems, they were looking at something that resembled a living brain. "The human intuition algorithms are merging with the alien computational cores," Lee explained, his voice filled with wonder. "For 3 years they've been fighting each other, trying to work together but never quite managing it. Now they're becoming something entirely new. The ship's artificial intelligence had been humanity's most ambitious project. Earth's programmers had tried to create a system that could think like a human, making decisions based on instinct and creativity, rather than just cold logic. But when they combined it with alien technology, the result had been chaos. The two systems spoke different languages, thought in different ways, and constantly interfered with each other. Park Mina watched the display screen with fascination. "It's like they're finally learning to communicate," she said. "The human parts are teaching the alien parts about intuition and creativity. The alien parts are teaching the human parts about processing power and energy manipulation." As they watched, the ship began to change around them. Panels that had been dark for years suddenly lit up with new information. Corridors that had always felt cold began to warm as the environmental systems optimized themselves. The engines, which had always run with a rough, irregular rhythm, smoothed out into a perfect, harmonic hum. Captain Kim felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. "What does this mean for our mission?" he asked. Lee checked his readings again, hardly believing what he was seeing. "Sir, the ship is operating at 300% of its original specifications. The weapon systems are drawing power directly from the quantum fold drive. The shields are using some kind of adaptive technology that I don't even understand. The Prometheus isn't just working properly for the first time. It's working better than anyone ever imagined it could." The ship's computer spoke for the first time in months, its voice no longer the mechanical tone they remembered, but something warmer, more alive. "Captain Kim, we are ready to protect humanity. We have been preparing for this moment since our creation." Han Sol stared at the navigation console as new star charts appeared, showing jump routes that no human had ever calculated. "The ship knows where the enemy fleet is," he reported in amazement. "It's been tracking them for hours." The Prometheus had been waiting. Through 3 years of apparent failures and malfunctions, it had been learning, growing, preparing for the moment when humanity would truly need it. The real threat approaching Earth had awakened something that its creators never knew they had built. Not just a warship, but a guardian. War Commander Torval was reviewing casualty reports from the latest colony destruction when his tactical, Officer interrupted with news that made him laugh out loud. A single human vessel was approaching Battle Fleet Dominus, moving faster than any human ship should be able to travel. One ship? Torval asked, genuinely amused. They're sending one. Ship against 300? The tactical display showed the approaching vessel clearly. It was smaller than most hegemony fighters, barely worth noticing among the massive alien warships. The human ship looked primitive compared to the sleek organic curves of hegemony. Vessels. Its hull was simple metal and composite materials, nothing like the living crystal that formed hegemony ships. It appears to be their experimental vessel, sir, reported the tactical officer. Our intelligence suggests it's been malfunctioning for years. Earth Command probably sent it because they have nothing else left. Torvald shook his head in disbelief. In thousands of years of conquest, he had never seen such a desperate act. Most species at least sent their entire fleet when facing the hegemony, even though the result was always the same. But humanity was sending a single broken ship crewed by what their intelligence reports called failures and outcasts. Send Squadron 7 to destroy it, he ordered casually. 50 ships should be more than enough. I want this over quickly, so we can continue to the core worlds. Squadron 7 broke away from the main fleet with the casual confidence of predators, hunting wounded prey. 50 hegemony warships, each one capable of destroying entire planets, moved to intercept the lone human vessel. Their commanders were already discussing who would get credit for the easy kill. Captain Kim Juno watched the enemy squadron approach on his main screen. 50 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. 3. Years ago, the sight would have filled him with terror. Now he felt something different, absolute calm. All hands, battle stations, he announced over the ship's communication system. Prepare for engagement. The Prometheus responded to his command like a living thing. Weapon systems that had never worked properly suddenly came online with perfect precision. The quantum phase cannons, which Earth's engineers had declared defective failures, began charging with energy that made the ship's hull vibrate. With power, Squadron 7 opened fire first, filling space with plasma beams hot enough to melt asteroids. The energy weapons struck the Prometheus directly, enough firepower to vaporize a human battleship. But instead of exploding, something incredible happened. The ship's adaptive armor absorbed the plasma energy and began to glow. The alien-human, hybrid technology that had seemed so unreliable suddenly revealed its true purpose. Every attack made the Prometheus stronger, feeding power into its systems and reinforcing its defenses. Impossible, whispered the Squadron 7 commander, as his most powerful weapons were absorbed harmlessly. Then the Prometheus fired back. The quantum phase weapons cut through space like invisible knives, slicing through hegemony shields as if they didn't exist. Ships that had never been damaged in centuries of warfare suddenly found their hulls splitting apart at the molecular level. The weapons didn't just destroy the enemy vessels, they unmade them, reducing advanced alien technology to its basic atomic components. One by one, the hegemony ships exploded or simply fell apart. Their shields, which had deflected every human weapon ever fired at them, were useless against technology they had never encountered. Within minutes, all 50 vessels were nothing but glowing debris scattered across space. War Commander Torval stared at his tactical display in absolute shock. An entire squadron, destroyed by a single human ship that intelligence had called a broken failure. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The Prometheus hung motionless in space, surrounded by the wreckage of its enemies, waiting for the next challenge. War Commander Torval felt his hands trembling as he stared at the empty space where Squadron 7 had been moments before. 50 of his best ships, destroyed by a single human vessel that should have been nothing more than scrap metal. The impossible had become reality, and now he faced a choice that no hegemony commander had ever confronted: retreat or risk everything. "Sir, should we call for reinforcements?" asked his tactical officer, voice shaking with uncertainty. "No," Torval replied through gritted teeth. "We are Battle Fleet Dominus. We have conquered worlds, destroyed civilizations, and crushed every enemy we've ever faced. I will not be remembered as the commander who ran from a single primitive ship. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice carrying to all 250 remaining vessels. All ships, focus every weapon on that human vessel. I want it reduced to atoms. Fire everything you have. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 250 hegemony warships turned their weapons toward the Prometheus, creating a concentration of firepower that could have cracked a moon in half. Plasma cannons, particle beams, gravity weapons, and exotic energy systems all fired at once, turning space into a storm of destructive force. But the Prometheus was no longer the same ship that had been exiled to the Outer Rim. As the enemy weapons approached, the vessel moved in ways that defied everything the hegemony knew about space combat. It didn't just dodge the incoming fire, it danced between the energy beams like it could predict where each shot would be. Fired before the enemy commanders even gave the orders. Captain Kim stood on the bridge, watching his ship perform maneuvers that should have been impossible. "How are we doing this?" he asked in amazement. "The AI has been studying every piece of alien technology humanity has ever encountered," Engineer Li Wu reported from his station. "Not just hegemony tech, but fragments from dozens of different species. It's been preparing for this battle for decades, creating countermeasures for weapons and tactics we'd never even seen before." The ship's computer spoke, its voice now carrying a warmth that sounded almost human. "We have analyzed their battle formations, Captain Kim. The hegemony fights like a machine, predictable, efficient, but inflexible. We will show them the power of human creativity." What happened next was like watching an artist paint with weapons of war. The Prometheus used the hegemony's own tactics against them, but enhanced with something no alien species possessed: pure human unpredictability. When the enemy fleet formed their traditional attack formation, the ship attacked from an angle they never expected. When they tried to surround it, the Prometheus did something no military manual had ever suggested. It flew straight through the center of their formation, destroying ships with surgical precision. Lieutenant Park Mina watched the tactical display with growing excitement. "Sir, we're not just winning, we're making it look easy." The hegemony ships began to break formation as their commanders panicked. Ships that had fought together for centuries suddenly couldn't coordinate their attacks. The Prometheus was everywhere at once, appearing behind enemy vessels before they could turn, striking weak points that no human should have known existed. Navigator. Han Sol tracked their movement through the enemy fleet. "The ship knows exactly where to hit them," he reported in wonder. "It's like it can see their weak spots before they even know they have them." War Commander Torval watched his mighty fleet being torn apart by a single enemy vessel. Ships were exploding all around him, their crews, some of the finest warriors in the galaxy, helpless against an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. The Prometheus moved through the hegemony formation like a predator among sheep, untouchable and unstoppable, turning the tide of a battle that should have lasted seconds into humanity's greatest victory. The battle that was supposed to demonstrate hegemony superiority became their greatest nightmare. War Commander Torval watched his flagship's main screen as the Prometheus destroyed the last of his escort vessels, their hulls splitting apart like broken toys. 299 ships of Battlefleet Dominus were now nothing but glowing debris scattered across space. "Retreat!" he screamed at his remaining crew. "All power to engines! We must warn the High Command!" But the Prometheus was already moving to intercept his flagship. The human vessel appeared directly in front of them, blocking their escape route with casual ease. Torval had time for one final transmission before the quantum phase weapons tore his ship apart, leaving no trace that Battlefleet Dominus had ever existed. In the aftermath of the destruction, something even more remarkable happened. The Prometheus. Extended sensors that Torval would never have understood, quantum detection arrays that could penetrate the very fabric of space itself. These sensors found and accessed the hegemony's vast communication network, a system that connected every world in their 400-system empire. Engineer Li Wu stared at his instruments in amazement. "Captain, the ship is broadcasting something across the entire hegemony network. It's sending out the battle footage." "The battle footage?" Captain Kim asked, not understanding the implications. Everything that just happened, the destruction of their entire fleet. Every world in the Hegemony Empire is watching us destroy their most powerful battle group. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds that had lived under hegemony rule for centuries, something unprecedented was happening. In the slave colonies of the Kethani system, workers stopped their forced labor to stare at screens showing impossible images. A single small ship, belonging to a species they had never heard of, was systematically destroying the most feared fleet in the galaxy. On the mining world of Vextar Prime, an elderly Zephyrian named Kolthan watched the footage with tears streaming down his weathered face. His people had been conquered by the hegemony 50 years ago. He had watched their proud civilization reduced to slavery, their warriors broken, their hope extinguished. Now he was seeing their oppressors destroyed by strangers who had appeared from nowhere. "The hegemony can be beaten," he whispered to his fellow miners. "They're not invincible, they're not gods." The footage spread like wildfire across the communication networks. On Mordak Station, reptilian saurians who had served as hegemony soldiers for generations suddenly began questioning their orders. On the agricultural world of New Talos, human-like Altarians who had forgotten what freedom meant started gathering in secret meetings. The impact was immediate and catastrophic for the Empire. Within hours of the footage being broadcast, uprisings began on dozens of worlds. Species that had been crushed under hegemony rule for centuries suddenly found the courage to fight back. They had seen proof that their oppressors could bleed, could die, could be defeated. On the industrial world of Corvin III, factory workers overpowered their hegemony overseers and seized control of weapons manufacturing plants. The insectoid, hive minds of the outer spiral, who had been forced to produce war materials for the Empire, turned their production facilities toward creating weapons for rebellion. Captain Kim watched the reports flooding in through the ship's communication systems. "We didn't just win a battle," he said in amazement. "We started a revolution." Lieutenant Parkmina was monitoring the galactic communication networks, her face lit up with excitement. "Sir, it's happening everywhere. Rebellions on over 100 worlds and counting. The hegemony is sending forces to crush the uprisings, but they're spread too thin, they can't be everywhere at once." The Prometheus had done more than destroy a fleet. It had destroyed something far more powerful, the myth of hegemony invincibility. For the first time in thousands of years, the oppressed peoples of the galaxy had hope, and hope was the most dangerous weapon of all. The empire that had ruled 400 worlds was beginning to crumble, brought down by a single ship crewed by outcasts and failures who had just changed the course of galactic history. 6 months after the destruction of Battlefleet Dominus, the galaxy was unrecognizable. What had once been the mighty hegemony empire was now a collection of burning worlds and desperate battles, as centuries of oppression finally erupted into open revolution. Captain Kim Juno stood in his quarters aboard the Prometheus, reading reports that would have seemed like fantasy just a year ago. The Kethani system had declared independence and successfully fought off 3 hegemony fleets. The mining colonies of the Outer Rim had formed their own defensive alliance. Even the core worlds of the Empire were experiencing riots and uprisings that grew stronger each day. "Captain," Lieutenant Parkmina's voice came through the communication system. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command." Kim made his way to the bridge, where the main screen showed Admiral Choi Tae sitting behind his desk on Earth. But the Admiral looked different now, confident, hopeful, no longer the desperate man who had sent them on what everyone thought was a suicide mission. "Captain Kim," Admiral Choi began, "on behalf of Earth Command and the entire human race, I want to thank you and your crew. What you accomplished has changed everything, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy." Kim felt embarrassed by the praise. "We were just doing our duty, sir." "You did far more than that," the Admiral replied. "You've given hope to billions of beings who had forgotten what freedom meant. But now we need you to do something even more important." The screen changed to show a star map of local space with dozens of systems highlighted in different colors. Some were marked as former hegemony strongholds, others as newly liberated worlds, and many more as unknown territories. The galaxy is in chaos, Admiral Choi continued. The hegemony is collapsing, but that creates new problems. Without their control, some systems are falling into anarchy. Others are being invaded by opportunistic raiders. The species that are fighting for freedom need help, guidance, and protection. Navigator Han Sol leaned forward in his chair. What are our orders, sir? Take the Prometheus and represent humanity to the galaxy, not as conquerors like the hegemony, but as liberators. Help the enslaved species gain their freedom, protect the weak from those who would exploit the chaos. Show them that there's a better way to live among the stars. In the engineering section, Li Wu was watching his instruments with continuing amazement. The ship's systems were still evolving, becoming more sophisticated every day. New functions appeared regularly, capabilities that hadn't existed in the original blueprints. The hybrid technology was learning, adapting, preparing for challenges they hadn't even imagined yet. "You know what the funny thing is?" he said to his assistant. "Earth Command used to call us failures. They thought we were the crew they didn't want, stuck on the ship that didn't work." His assistant, Engineer Park Jun, nodded while checking the quantum fold drive readings. "And now we're their most important mission." "We were never failures," Lee replied with a smile. "We were just waiting for the right moment to show what we could really do." The Prometheus began receiving communication, requests from across the galaxy, former slave worlds asking for help, resistance movements requesting supplies and support, species that had never been contacted by humans, curious about the people who had brought down the mighty hegemony with a single ship. Captain Kim accepted the first request, a distress call from the Altarian colonies where hegemony loyalists were trying to crush her independence movement. As the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, he looked around at his crew of supposed outcasts and misfits. Lieutenant Park Mina, the officer who had been demoted for questioning orders, was now coordinating liberation efforts across 3 star systems. Navigator Han Sol, whose experimental ideas had been called dangerous, was plotting courses to worlds that had never appeared on human star charts. Engineer Li Wu, whose theories about alien technology had been ridiculed, was maintaining systems that were rewriting the laws of physics. The age of human expansion had begun, but not through conquest or domination. Humanity would spread among the stars as liberators, protectors, and friends to those who needed help. The galaxy would never be the same, and it all started with a forgotten ship crewed by people who had been written off as failures. The Prometheus disappeared into hyperspace, carrying hope to the stars.